In respect of the folks who have joined, we like to get started on time here, and thank you so much for joining us today. We are recording this webinar, and it will be available afterwards for rebroadcast as well. Thank you to our friends at ImageWorks for helping us put this together as they help produce all of our webinars. They're a great organization, handles all of our outside marketing needs. So appreciate all of their help with this. Today, we're going to be talking about the economics of data backup, go through some examples and lay out some of the math for how the different data backup solutions that you choose can, how they affect the risk of your organization and the potential financial impact. Your expert today is going to be Bob Thomas. He's the VCIO, VCASO for cyber security and our clients, as well as a certified information security manager. I'm Mike Jafrida, president of cyber security, and I'm here really mostly just to keep things going. I'll watch for your questions and make sure that they get answered if appropriate. You can submit them through the Q&A throughout the course of the webinar. We'll answer as many as we can, and if your question does not get answered, we'll be happy to follow up with you afterwards. With that, I'll be handing over to Bob to talk about our sample case study. Bob?
Excellent. Thanks very much, Mike. And folks, thanks very much for joining today. As Mike said, we're going to go through, I think this will be a pretty quick run through of an example that we put together. We're using an accounting firm. It definitely doesn't have to be an accounting firm. It happens to be very similar to one of our clients. It could be a manufacturer, warehouse, distributor, law firm, medical practice, nonprofit. I think the numbers will be very similar for any of those organizations based on the size that we've got here up on the screen. We used 135 employees, not everybody in the office, 20 of those being remote. I think the real key to this is a combination. They've got 5 terabytes of data that need protecting. It is a single location, so it is a relatively simple sample to be able to protect. It's not data scattered everywhere, and roughly $10 million in annual revenue. So that's the framework of a company that we're looking to understand how they protect their information and the risks based on different types of protection. Next. So one of the things that people need to probably understand as part of this are how do we protect data, but you have to think about what are you really protecting against. And on the screen, we've got a list of reasons data gets lost and needs either to be restored, reconstructed, and those two things are different. I've got somebody, I hit the delete button. I thought I'd move this folder from one place to a different place, but it vanished. It got deleted. I thought I emptied it. Where is it? Electronically corrupted data. This is kind of an interesting one. There's statistics around that have been around for quite some time that, as the screen shows, it's a bunch of ones and zeros, and you may all recall that that's how data gets stored electronically, just flipping basically switches on and off to be able to store information. Well, when you do that, the statistics show that at least 1 out of every 1,000,000 characters that get stored is going to be corrupt. So this is nothing that you can protect against. It is the nature of electronic storage and magnetic media storage, whether it's solid state, non-moving parts, or a needle writing to a disk, a platter. That's just the way it is. So you need to factor that in when you're trying to protect your information. Intentionally corrupted data, probably the worst type, really, because this is typically not just one little bit of data. This is large sums. You get hit with ransomware. Ransomware encrypts the information, changes the file names, and makes the data inaccessible. It works very quickly, so it can run through an entire server in literally an hour everything on your server can be encrypted, and then it starts crawling across your network looking for other things to damage. And I guess similarly, a disgruntled employee maybe not encrypting data, but deleting data en masse before they get shown the door would be something else you'd want to protect against and be able to restore from backup very quickly if something like this happens. Everybody knows about hardware failure, whether it's server or some other component. We talk about servers because that's usually the main point of storage. How quickly can you get back up and running once there is a hardware failure? And full-on site outage, flood, fires, tornadoes. We have a client that they had a fire in their building, and luckily some of our personnel are on the volunteer fire department and went running out of the building with a server and with backup tapes back in the day. We would never worry about that today because we've got automatic offsite backups, but these are things that you have to think about if you're not using offsite backup and the virtues of that. Next. So things that probably don't necessarily get thought about, certainly not every day, but not even maybe not even annually with respect to frequency of backups. There's a term out there in the industry called RPO, recovery point objective. The simple explanation of it is, what point in time will I have to go back to when I go to restore from one of my backups, and how much data am I going to sacrifice because I'm not taking backups frequently enough? So there's frequency of backups as a component of this. How many backups are you storing? Some people keep 7 days of backups and that's it. Some people do 2 weeks of backups, and we don't even really consider that sufficient, because what happens if you're not, somebody takes a 2-week vacation, somebody deleted data, they don't notice it for 2 weeks until someone comes back. Oh, that backup has already been overwritten. Those types of things still exist out in the world and need to be protected against. And what, we don't, as a provider, think about what data got selected for backups because we're backing up entire machines and images of those machines, but there are programs and software tools out there that you have to check a checkbox or a series of checkboxes in order to determine what is going to actually get written as part of that backup. I think that's kind of a key thing to understand. Just going back for 1 second to this whole recovery point objective, it's pretty common for people to back up once a day and that's it, and they run a quote unquote full backup every day. When in fact, can you lose an entire day's worth of data and be able to reconstruct it? Whether that's easy or difficult, can it be done at all? People should be thinking about, how can I back up more frequently? It's pretty common when we put a system in that we're setting it to back up every hour. So the worst case scenario, we're talking about losing 59 minutes worth of information if we have to go back to backup and restore. Next. So what we want to talk about is how different types of backups, and you see them here on the screen, will be impacted when you go to rely on them and restore from them. So this particular example that we put together, the entire site is down. Doesn't matter the reason at the moment. We can talk about different scenarios, or you can ask questions about this. In this particular sample, we said, hey, maybe it's ransomware that hit the, somebody clicked on something on a desktop, it goes looking for resources, and it says, yep, I'm going to encrypt the server. Server gets completely encrypted, and you've got no access to any of the data there. And here are the 3 different types of backups that are most common in use today. A basic, what people will call file and folder backup, that's run, as I was just talking about on the previous slide, once a day. And maybe that's not a full backup. Maybe you make a full once a week or once a month, and then you do some sort of incrementals because there's not enough time to make more backups than that. Then you've got something called a local image backup. So you're taking an entire quote unquote picture of a server and you're writing it to something, but it's only being stored local. That something can be another server, it can be network storage of some sort. And those typically, the way they're configured, can be run more than once a day, just based on how long they take to run. 3 times a day, that's not crazy to say that that's how frequently. And then BCDR, that's business continuity and disaster recovery. That's a kind of a full service version of backup. So it's backing up using an image, and taking that entire picture of the server, as I mentioned, writing it to a dedicated appliance, typically, and that appliance then replicates the information offsite automatically at the end of the day. So if something does go terribly wrong on site, even the equipment being damaged that's doing the backup, you've got an alternative location to pull back from. Next. So let's go through some numbers. What we put together here is a little chart based on each of the scenarios that I just explained. So we've got a file-based column, we've got a local image only column, and local happens to be the real tipping point with that particular one, and full business continuity and disaster recovery. That's a full service solution, if you will. And if you look at the numbers here, and we're going to look on the next few slides exactly how this breaks down in each one of the categories. But what we're trying to, the point we're trying to make here is lost productivity, paying staff, paying employees to quote unquote sit around and not be productive is a huge component of the cost. And in that first scenario where we're talking about file-based backup, obviously you could see the numbers are dramatic based on that sample company, that sample accounting firm that we talked about. Well, if you've got 35 people sitting around getting paid and not being able to produce product, work product, tax returns, accounting data, yes, maybe that information can be made up, but how quickly can it be made up? By whom? How much are you going to have to pay people for overtime or compensation of some sort? And do you really have all the information available on that backup? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but in order to get up and running quicker, some people will have to pay the ransom. $50,000 ransom payment is pretty substantial, but those are average numbers in today's world based on this size of data set, 5 terabytes, and accounting data that plays into this as well. You've got personally identifiable information falling into the wrong hands. You've got a reputation damage component here. All of these add up to, we're talking over $500,000 in lost, not just productivity, but we've got all these follow-on costs and we haven't gotten up and running. So we've got a recovery cost of $31,000. Maybe that's rebuilding servers, restoring from backup if the backup is functional. It's likely the backup will not be functional in this particular scenario. We may have to send out for data recovery, and data recovery companies that, for servers, 10 to 30,000 is pretty common number. And we're talking 5-10 days without that data. It's pretty common that you'll be down for the number is 21 days statistically, but 2 weeks is, I think, a common one for file-based backup that you'll be down for without having a more sophisticated backup system. You go to local image, the numbers are still substantial. We're talking over $250,000 to recover because we've got a local hit and we don't have anything offsite. So you have to assume that not only did your production data you get encrypted and, locked, let's say. Well, you've also got a backup that potentially got impacted, and that data is not accessible because it's only local. It doesn't get off-site. Now we're talking about same thing going to some backup and recovery company that just is able to decrypt the data if you can get the key, or you've got to pay the ransom, which is, kind of on a wing and a prayer. You pay the ransom. There's no guarantee you're getting the unlock key. If you get the unlock key and it does actually release the data from the locked state that it's in, you'll probably feel really good at that moment, except they still have a copy of your data potentially and could be selling that on the dark web. So it's not a total solution, and obviously it has significant costs that go along with it. And then you look at full backup and disaster recovery. So it's not backup, it's not just that disaster recovery, but that business continuity piece is how quickly can I get back up and running with a solution like that. So yeah, we agree that there's still going to be lost productivity because you still have to get servers up and running from the appliance, but we're not sitting there waiting for new equipment to arrive. We're not waiting to pay a ransom. We're not paying for a restore to take place immediately. I haven't really delved into the reputation damage. There could still be a concern. We got hit with ransomware. You have to tell the Attorney General. If you're in medical field, you got to tell OCR, the Office of Civil Rights. If this is financial services, SEC may have to get involved. There's different reporting requirements, and that may impact your reputation. You may have to get your cyber insurance carrier involved with sort of a press release and public relations assistance from them. But I think the important thing is, even if the data locally is a problem, we've got a quick way to get you back up and running right off the appliance, which won't be impacted because it's not on the same network and it's not viewable from the server, so it can't be encrypted. And even then, if we've got full on site damage, that's okay. We can go back to the cloud because we can fire servers up in the cloud because all that data and information is replicated every single night off to 2 data centers actually. So that's kind of how the math goes. And okay, it's still $50,000, but when you compare it against the other options, and you'll see kind of in the coming slides here exactly how the price breaks down for each of these and the overall return on risk reduction is probably the best way to look at this. Let me take a look at the next slide. I think it's probably a good time now, just going through those scenarios, to throw out a poll here. Just give us an idea of what type of solution you employ today. Is it that file and folder based software solution that backs up to something, USB drive, external hard drive, removable disk cartridge, those types of things? Is it a local image that is a piece of software, but it writes it to something locally? It could still be network attached storage of some sort, but it doesn't go off site automatically. Full business continuity disaster recovery, it's taking pictures of the servers and all the data, writing it to a quote unquote appliance. That's usually local, and then automatic offsite to at least 1 data center. So full protection. If you're not sure, that's okay too. I mean, you can say you're not sure. Not everybody is fully in tune with how they're doing things and exactly what technology is in place.
Brandon, have you collected some answers there? You want to give us percentages of each that people have responded?
Sure, yep. It appears for file-based, about 17% of the respondents said that, about 17% for local image, a few folks who already have full BCDR, and then a few for I'm not sure as well.
Great. So well spread across all of the answers.
Yeah, pretty typical of what we see, I think, by being out in the field. So just so we can kind of get our arms all the way around this, we talked about the risks and exactly what would be involved in a recovery of sorts. Well, let's let's try to get our hands around exactly what it costs to implement these different solutions. You know, we're using the same sample company, so the same data set that we just talked about having to protect. So you've got file-based, you know, upfront. It doesn't cost substantial money, $4,000-ish. And then you've got a couple $1,000s each year, whether that's replacement equipment, support renewals for the type of software. But those are the components that usually make up that solution. And you've got the local image, a little bit more robust on the initial investment because it's more robust equipment. It's usually server class or large network attached storage. And then you've got a larger annual investment because it's more sophisticated software and the support is usually a bit more. Over on the full business continuity side, I know it looks like a typo that there's nothing up in the initial investment, but a product that we use is made by a company called Datto out of Norwalk, and they've gone to a model where the hardware is free and you commit to using their service and they'll give you the equipment. And there's an example of what an annual service contract would be when we put that solution in, just under 20,000. So, you know, if we look at this, okay, it is a little bit more than the others, but quite honestly, we're talking about insignificant when we talk about the risks and the protection that it's putting in place based on the previous calculations that we saw. So on the next slide, you're gonna see exactly what we mean by what's going on here. So the file-based backup solution, you know, across 3 years, costs you just under 20,000. Average incident cost is substantial because it's more difficult to recover. There's much more risk there because the entire backup can be encrypted because of the way it's attached to the system. You know, you're over 600,000 if you have just one incident across a 3-year time frame. That's ridiculous money. And then you have to think about, you know, even if you have cyber liability insurance, are your limits going to be able to handle something like this? And if they are, is your cyber carrier going to pay out on it? You know, do they like the implementation of backup? One of the questions that gets asked on every one of those cyber insurance questionnaires and applications is, do you have an immutable backup? Meaning, if your backup gets, if your production data gets hit, is the backup immune to being also compromised? And unless you've got some sort of separation between those two things and then some sort of offsite, I think you've got a problem there. Where if you answered yes, it is, I don't think they're going to pay on it. And we've seen those scenarios in place where people have answered the questions, maybe not knowing the difference, but when it comes time to file a claim, I think they run into problems because it doesn't match exactly what the carrier hoped you had in place, because they didn't expect that risk, and they didn't charge a premium based on it. So similarly, we've put together what a local only image-based backup. So 3 years in this scenario, and based on extrapolating the numbers that we had, 54,000 for an investment, you know, hardware, software, support, services to make that system run across 3 years. And then if you do have an incident, based on our previous calculations, almost 300,000 to recover from that incident. Again, we use ransomware as an example. So there's, you know, paying the ransom because you couldn't get it your backup because it was local and got encrypted as well is a piece of it, but lost productivity because now you've got to rebuild servers in order to be able to put data back because the backup appliance that you have can't restore. So it's almost a build from scratch scenario, which is why this is such a substantial hit. You're going to experience, you know, a week of downtime is what we're counting on in this scenario, as opposed to minutes or hours. And we've got the full BCDR scenario as opposed to, you know, 500,000 or $350,000 across 3 years. We're a little over 100,000. And that comes from the investment of just the service, no appliance cost because the appliance is free, 58,000. And then if an incident hits, we're not paying ransom payments to anyone. Okay, maybe we do lose a client because of downtime outage. Yes, we've got to restore at some point, but we can push a button and be up and running. One server very quickly, minutes. 4 servers, couple hours of downtime is what you should experience right off the appliance, and can't tell the difference because it's a picture of the server, so it's the same thing. Then you start to see exactly the benefits of this between a modest, relatively modest investment across time, leasable if that's your preference, and of course we're reducing downtime. That's the real key to the whole thing, is getting all of your data back as quickly as possible and making yourself operational and whole. And I think we've got a great slide that just shows the breakdown of those numbers that we just went through. So a local image product can get you a 40% reduction in your risk over the file-based, which file-based, we rarely see it out there. We saw 17% in the poll. It's a dangerous way. People relying on swapping hard drives and carrying hard drives off-site every night with the risk of them being stolen or damaged. People leave them in the car and it's -5 outside. There's a good chance that that drive won't fire up again. So there's a lot of issues that come around with that technology. Local image seems like a great middle ground, except if you don't have off-site and you have a site failure like this, the damages are huge. Over 80% risk reduction in looking at exactly how a full business continuity solution would impact your environment in the face of a huge event. And I say huge event, meaning servers encrypted, one click. And I could tell you, we have somebody that's got over 10 terabytes of data, and they had somebody make that bad move, and we were actually able to get them completely up and running literally in minutes because it impacted one server, except it was their file server. And we said, look, you're going to run off the backup appliance all day, and overnight we'll put all the data back onto your server after we've wiped it clean. They come in the next day, they had no idea it had even happened. Put every single thing back. They lost like 10 files out of millions that had to get put back as part of that 10 terabytes of restore. But we got them up and running at the push of a button off the appliance that backs them up every day. So that's really where the benefit comes from. When something happens, how quickly can you get back up and really be whole? So some other things to consider that really justifies this. We talked about full site outage, and the scenario we gave was ransomware. Well, it doesn't have to be ransomware. Failed drives in a server can get triggered by a site outage. We could have a flood. A picture on the screen shows that. Well, that's going to take out any type of equipment. And now we've got probably an even bigger problem, because now we've got not only equipment that won't run, now we've got drives that you probably can't even send out for recovery and be confident you're going to get data off of them. So what happens? Oh, well, let's go to our backup. Well, our backup box got ruined too. Uh-oh. Now we got to go off-site. We don't have off-site. Now what do we do? And now you're talking about reconstructing data, looking at old backups if there's anything in a safe someplace, which may still work. So there's a lot of things come with that scenario. Equipment lead times. I'm positive everyone has experienced some sort of supply chain issue in the last 2 to 3 years. It used to be, I need a replacement server. Okay, how quickly do you want to pay to get it here? I don't care. I want it tomorrow. Okay. $450 to ship it. Don't care, send it. Now the scenario is, can I find one that's in stock where I can even think about shipping it? And does it meet my needs? Oh yeah, well, we can get it here, except the drives are on back order, or the processor, probably more likely than anything, is on back order. You might have to take a lesser machine and do restores twice. How long if I have to wait for the real machine? A week, 2 weeks, a month? Those are all impacting on exactly how you make a decision on what backup and recovery product you use. Can you survive without your data for 2, 3, 4 weeks? Probably not. And I'll tell you a story in a minute about that. And then server rolls in the door. What's next? Well, if you don't have business continuity and disaster recovery as a product and a service, you've got to start flipping in disks or downloading files and starting to build a system from scratch that resembles what you had previously. Now we're talking about days of work. Build one server. Okay, now we start restoring data to that. Well, while that's happening, let's build another one. What applications were on there? Well, it's on the backup. Well, we can't restore from backup. We have to remember what's on there. Now we have to go get license keys. We have to get downloads. It's a big, probably arduous is the best word I can come up with, task of rebuilding a system from scratch that you've never had to either build before or building it. Hey, this is an opportunity to build a new version. Okay, you can do that. Now we need new software. Now we have to talk to the software vendor. Does our, how do we get our data to talk to it? A lot of considerations, translated a lot of time that would impact that. That's the scenario you really don't want to go down. It's having to do full rebuilds. And it probably makes sense to tell you, if you've got full business continuity / disaster recovery, so that's when we're talking about all that in one solution, you can basically copy the entire image back. So yeah, we had to replace the server. Okay, that's fine. The hardware's there. Copy the images back, copy them when it's convenient for you over a weekend, overnight, and then fire them up the next morning. You're not talking about rebuilding from scratch, reinstalling applications. The whole thing comes back as one ball of wax, so to speak.
Thanks, Bob. We're going to we'll pause for a second here and take some questions. Had some coming through in the Q&A, and if others have questions they want to submit, please continue to do so. One of the questions that I had here is, what is one of the biggest challenges that you've seen when someone didn't have their data properly backed up? I guess meaning with that BCDR solution that you've described there, Bob.
Well, there's a medical practice that I recall. They had a file-based backup solution. So it would rely on either making full backups if time allowed every single night, or it would make a full, typically on a Friday, and then let's say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it would do incremental. So anything that changed. They got hit by ransomware, and this is not we're not talking hospital size. We're talking about a handful of doctor providers, maybe 15 to 20 person office, and they called their provider and said, "Can you help us and restore?" They went to the backup that they were using and found that the backups hadn't been working in 7 months. No alerting set up, no testing of the backups on a regular basis. I hate to say it, it was, for whoever the provider was, they were kind of caught with their pants down to say, "Oh, we thought it was working." Well, in that scenario, they had two choices: pay the ransom and get their data back and unlocked. They didn't have the money to do it. It was a substantial ransom because, the people that asked for these threat actors that ask for these ransom, payments, they know what they have for data. This is not a mystery as to what they've done and who they've impacted. Talking medical data, how they know huge fines are going to be in play. So the ransom correspondingly increases. They didn't have the money in Bitcoin and cash to be able to pay the ransom. They figured, oh, let's just get open the doors and we'll see who walks through. Well, not only did they not have access to their electronic medical record data, that's really bad. They had no access to their schedule and appointment book. They had no idea who was going to walk through the door. And then they would have to start basically from scratch with each one of those. Here, can you fill out these forms? Well, I've already done that. Well, we lost them, so we need to start from scratch. No medical history. They lasted 3 weeks and shut the doors. They had no way to deal with the requirements of starting from scratch when they didn't have access to their information. And every day that they were open was an adventure with them showing up and people walking through the door and surprising them, not knowing who was going to come and show up. That's a biggie.
That's tragic.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
A few other questions here. I think you touched on this a little bit, but what is the average time that it takes to bring a server back up in that BCDR solution? Because you said a few different things. You said minutes, You said hours, you said a day. Explain that a little bit, please.
Yeah, sure. So the reality is, if you've got an image-based backup solution with that full BCDR and appropriate horsepower, based on how it was specified, you should be able to get a server. And if you have multiples, you can probably extrapolate this pretty easily, back up and running in 15 minutes. That's a very typical number. Obviously you have to find out that there's a problem first and choose what the solution's going to be. Oh, this is a major issue. We're going to back up. We're going to start firing up servers virtually on this box, on this appliance. Once you've made that decision, it should be literally 15 minutes to be back up and running. It requires 2 reboots of the system. You boot it, you tell it to mount, you determine the IP address, the internet address of the device that was compromised. You take that address, plug it into the machine, tell it start with that, it reboots once more, and it makes itself available. People connect to it, they can't tell the difference. The hours that I talked about is, not everybody has just one server. We've got clients with 6, 10. We've got somebody that we're talking to that's got over 50 servers. Takes time to bring those online. You can do them simultaneously. It's still going to take a little time for the box to boot, put an address in there, reboot. So it could take hours to bring several servers back online. They have to be brought up in a certain order because there's dependencies. And then, it may take 4 to 8 hours if you had to go to offsite, if the appliance was, we go back to the flood example that I spoke about earlier. All right, the server's dead and the backup appliance is dead too. All right, let's not panic. Let's open an emergency ticket with the vendor, and they'll work with us to basically set up a connection so that we can get to their cloud data center, Pennsylvania, Utah, Toronto, Vancouver, depending on where you are across the globe, Germany, UK, you name it. And we can fire up servers, same thing, minutes, but we've got to get your staff connected to that data center. It takes a little hand holding, a little work for each person. Does it take 10 minutes a person? Yeah, probably 15 if they've never done this or never seen this before, probably. But firing up the environment is quick. It's the getting everybody accustomed to working in a disaster scenario is probably a bigger thing.
Gotcha. This is one came through that I hear a lot. and maybe you can shed some light on the truth around all this. What if I just move all my data to the cloud?
Yeah.
Is it safe then? Do I still need to back it up? Can I avoid all of this confusion, frustration, whatever that happens during these different types of incidents?
So it's really kind of interesting. I think this is probably the biggest misnomer in the world today. Is like, well, I moved my stuff to the cloud, so I'm all set. Whatever all set means. And there's a lot of circumstances where we'll agree with the strategy of moving to the cloud. It's probably become even more popular with COVID, of people working from everywhere and trying to get access to data anywhere. So I understand the decision, but you should never assume that the cloud provider is backing up your data without, number one, a contract that says they're going to, and number two, proof that they're actually doing it, and testing, number three, that they have verified that whatever they're doing or saying they're doing is actually happening. I can pick on Microsoft, but I think we could use Amazon with AWS, or we could use Google's hosted server environment. All of those are an example. You put your mail there, you put your file storage there, you use your virtual servers. They do not carry any responsibility for backing up that data. Their responsibility is to keep the data center running. Power in the door, internet connectivity, HVAC cooling the place, wiring to connect everything infrastructure-wise inside the facility, servers whirring away, storage being consumed. That's their responsibility. Your server crashes and dies. Yeah, okay, they'll help get the server back operational. And in some circumstances, maybe not even do that, but they will verify that the hardware is not the problem. And it's your responsibility, or your provider's responsibility, to make it functional. And make it functional means restore the data. And restore the data means wherever you are backing it up. We've got plenty of people hosted in Microsoft Azure, and we've got dedicated backup solutions in place for those folks, specifically because Microsoft doesn't automatically do it. We've got every single client that has Microsoft 365, we've got their data replicated to another data center, because somebody deletes their mailbox by mistake. Microsoft has zero responsibility for being able to recover it. That is not, they've even published documents about this. And their document says you should have your data replicated to a third-party location. That's their verbiage. So I get the ease of pushing stuff to the cloud and the ease of connectivity and the flexibility it affords. It doesn't necessarily let you off the hook with respect to protecting that data. And I think the same things that we talked about here about where is the data once it's backed up. Is it still in your cloud provider? So if they have a data center outage, not only is your production system down, your backup system's down. That's bad. Is it offsite to another one of their facilities? Okay, better. Is it offsite to a third party's facility? Better still. When stuff goes wrong, having the stuff in an alternate location is really your saving grace at that point.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. One more we're going to hit here. I have some other questions that are somewhat specific to people's individual scenarios, so I'll respond to those afterwards individually.
Sure.
But one more generic one here. You mentioned the no initial investment on the BCDR solution. Is that common? Does everybody do that? How do they do that? Is there no equipment involved? How is it that they can pull that off?
How can that be possible? To be honest, I'm not so sure there's anybody else that does this. We haven't bumped into anybody that gives away the hardware. But there is an asterisk, and I'm sure that people wouldn't be surprised by this. It requires a commitment. You need to use the solution for 3 years so that the people that are giving you the equipment are getting something in return. So I guess, people could come up with a different way of phrasing it, that, oh yeah, well, we buy the equipment, but we lease it, and it reduces our monthly cost in one bucket and moves it to another. I mean, we could play with the finances of this all different ways, but it seems that Datto has figured out a way to alleviate let's call it a pain point or a struggle that people have in buying an appliance that is dedicated for a single purpose, for backup and recovery. So it is a physical box of all different sizes, whatever the size is that you need. And we go through a kind of a sizing exercise when we look at an environment to figure out how much storage they have, how much is being consumed, how much horsepower do they have to run their system, because obviously if we're going to run it, if their servers are down, we need to have similar horsepower to be able to fire up servers, feed information to users, those types of things. But this is probably one of the only methods where you can completely avoid paying for hardware and just treat it as a service.
Gotcha.
Does that answer?
Yes, I think you hit the points that they had asked there. Thank you for all of the great questions. Also, thank you for being part of our webinar today. As an additional thank you, we are offering for folks, because we just used a specific case study here today. But you might be wondering, what does that mean for my organization? What do my numbers look like? We're willing to do those calculations for your organization, specifically around the amount of people you have, the amount of data you have, et cetera. In the chat, Brandon has entered a link for a web page that you can sign up on that to get that calculation done for you. Basically, if we go through this, you can understand your financial risk based upon the current situation you have today, whatever backup you're using today, and then how that would be reduced if you were to go to the other types of solutions that are there. And you can explore some options to reduce that financial risk so that you can plan better for your organization and get yourself into better shape for the future. Ultimately, just have peace of mind that if you're using the full type of solution Bob has described, you'll have peace of mind that your data will be available when you need it, because that's we're in this business. We see this type of stuff every day. And the most painful thing for us is when our clients are in pain, and pain is generated when they've got downtime. They've got people walking around the office. What's going on? How come I can't get to the stuff? Hanging around waiting for things to happen. The phone's ringing and a client's calling and they can't get to their client information. We just hate to see anyone suffer in those types of ways. So you can go to that link and sign up to get that calculation done for your organization. Additionally, you can send an email to us at marketing@kybersecure.com, which is on the screen now. If you want to just reach out to us directly, and Bob or I will get back to you and talk about time to set that calculation up. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're giving you about 11 minutes back to your day. We thought this one would go through fairly quickly, but wanted to make sure we left enough time for the kinds of questions you had. You guys submitted great questions. I appreciate your participation. Hope everyone has a fantastic rest of their day. Thank you to ImageWorks again for helping us put this all together. Thank you, Bob, for the great information. And thanks for your interest in cybersecurity and the things we can do to help keep you cyber secure. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mike. Yep, you too.